continental breakfast outside tomorrow morning. And make sure you help yourself to the beverages that are out there in the lobby area today. Also, I want to thank Western Art Collector for the generous support for our Artist Award lunch, and then that which is happening tomorrow afternoon as well. The Williams Chadwick Family Charitable Foundation of the San Antonio Area Foundation for the Artist Awards. And then our 2023 Western Art title sponsors, the Clussy Foundation, Debbie and John T. Montfort, and the Plum Foundation. And then to the rest of our sponsors, we want to just say thank you to all of our sponsors as well. It takes a lot to help make this weekend happen. So as we get going, I want to introduce our fabulous moderator here. We have joining us again for this year, we have Michael Clawson, who's based in Phoenix, Arizona. He serves as the executive editor for Western Art Collector, American Art Collector, Native American Art, and American Fine Art magazine. He also hosts the podcast, The American Art Collective. Prior to joining the magazine world, he was an award-winning journalist and photojournalist in the Phoenix area. And if that wasn't enough to keep him busy, he has 3 kids, including twins, with his wife Sarah, that keep him extra busy as well. And he recently finished writing his first book and is already fast at work on his second book, both of which are related to the Western art world. So join me in welcoming Michael Clawson and the rest of us.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Is that okay? Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I'm so happy to be here today, and our panelists are going to be, it's going to be a lot of fun. So let me introduce you to them. Starting here to my immediate right is Abigail Kampmann, she's a dedicated Western art collector for more than 25 years. She is the CEO of Principal Auto Group in San Antonio, Texas. As a champion of the arts and culture in San Antonio, she is the board of director, on the board of directors for the Alamo Trust and other notable art and science institutions. Abigail, welcome. And to Abigail's right is our next guest, is Don Oelze. Don was born in New Zealand, and at an early age he had a fascination with America, especially with the lifestyle of cowboys and Indians. In 1992, while living in Seattle, he met a Native American named Everett, who produced native art and totems. While working with Everett, he did his first big native painting. After trying many different subjects, he knew that painting Native Americans was what he loved to do most. He and his wife, Utako, are presently living in Montana, studying the country and people that he loves to paint. Welcome, Don. And on the end, we have Tim Newton. Tim Newton's art life began in 1991 when he purchased a large drawing by cowboy artist of America member Gary Carter. 32 years later, he has been, among other things, the founder and curator of the American Masters, a major invitational art exhibition and fundraising show at New York City's venerable Salmagundi Club, where he subsequently served as chairman of the board and CEO. He serves on the boards of several art organizations, including the House Foundation and the board of advisors for the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. Tim is also the publisher of Western Art and Architecture magazine. Welcome, Tim. So today's theme is Headin' In. We're going to talk about what people are going to do with their collections, maybe when they get older, what do you do with it, where does it go, but also just really long-time collectors and how you manage a collection, what are your next steps, things that we can learn in this area. And I want to start with just a really simple question, and that is, what was the spark that started your interest in the West, or just in art in general? I'd love to hear what was sort of the thing that initiated your entry into this world that we all love. And Abigail, do you mind going first?
For me, it was my grandmother. My grandmother is an artist. I didn't really actually even know that, but when I was a little child, after school, I would go over to her house and she would have paints out. And so when I was young, I would do looming, and then I would do firing, I would do pottery. And I wasn't very good at painting, but I could needle paint, everything to do with art. And she's more of an abstract, actually. You see some artwork, it's abstract. But then for me, the got me really into the West is my family had a big love loves the Western art. And so in 1997, that was when I did my first, I went to a miniature show. And at the miniature show, I remember my dad, we just got recently married, my husband and I, and so my dad said, you know, he said, we need to go to the show. And I said, go to the show, I've never been to a show. And so we went out to Kerrville, and the CIA was out there, and so it was one of the miniature shows, and he said, put in for everything you really love, only put in for things you love. And I ended up getting drawn on 5. He told me I would only be lucky if you got drawn on 1. And so we went home with 4 paintings, and my husband was very quiet. And I said, what's that? And he goes, we just spent all of our money. And he was very quiet. I said, well, we don't need to go on a vacation for a couple of years. Okay? So we didn't. So it was awesome.
That's a fantastic story. I'm sure they were all thrilled that you purchased, the 4 that you were drawn.
Well, they were little. I mean, one was Roy Anderson. Martin Greeley, my first one. And but they was little. I mean, it wasn't very expensive guys. It was like this big. So they didn't believe that, which was really fun.
Don, what was your sort of entry into the art world?
Well, I was working in Japan. I worked in Japan for 10 years. And I worked for a Japanese company. And it's kind of stressful. I mean, it's working in a Japanese company, and I do speak a little Japanese. I can do Korean if you want. But it's very stressful. It's a hard day. They call them Japanese salarymen, and their life is really hard, and that's kind of what I was, a Japanese, well, not Japanese, but I was a salaryman. And I'd always loved art. I went to art school, actually, when I was younger. I decided to, on the weekends, just as a stress reliever, to start painting. Because I thought, well, I better do something, because this is, I was starting to lose my hair, and I was stressed out and stuff. So I bought some paints and some canvas, and I started painting. And I did that for a couple, 3 years, I think. And then I went home to visit some relatives that I had in Montana. And I have one relative who was an artist. He did the Russell, it was a Russell show, and back then they had in the Heritage Hotel, they had all these rooms, and people would have these rooms with their art and stuff, and then they'd have the auction, the big Russell auction in the middle of the hotel. And so I visited him in Montana, and I showed him some pictures of some of the stuff that I was doing. And he's like, wow, those are actually not too bad. He says, why don't you send me some of these here? And I have this room, and he explained the whole situation about the rooms and everything. He's like, I can maybe put a couple paintings in my room, and let's just see how they do. So I did that. I sent him a couple paintings. And the shipping was really expensive, so he did sell them, and I probably didn't make much money because the shipping from Japan was a lot. But anyway, I sent it to him, he sold those. And then, so the next year, he's like, we'll send me more. So I think I sent him another 2. And this went on for, 4 or 5 years, and pretty much everything that I sent him, he was able to sell. So it just got me thinking, wow, maybe there's something I should be doing that's not like working in Japan and being stressed out all the time. So my wife and I, we decided to just, take the blind leap and just see how it goes. And also my parents who lived in Seattle, they were getting older at the time, and I thought, I've been in Japan for 10 years now. I probably should go home. And I'm going to try this art thing. If that doesn't go, maybe I can, work at McDonald's or something. But anyway, I did it, and we moved, and I got hooked up with a guy who was an art rep, who was also a friend of my family member, who got me started. And we did the first year. I spent like 6 months doing, I think, 12 paintings, and we took them down to Vegas for the Cowboy Christmas thing you guys probably know about, and we sold out. And I made enough money on that first show to get me through to the next Cowboy Christmas. So I only had one show at Cowboy Christmas. So I did that for a few years, and that's basically how it started. It was mostly just a stress reliever from living in Japan and working there.
Wow. Yeah. And Tim, what was your sort of entry into this world?
Well, you mentioned it in my bio. So my best friend, I was born and raised in Colorado, Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and Torrington, Wyoming. And then we moved to New York City in 1976. And in 1991, my best friend from Longmont High School was a builder in Big Sky, Montana. And I made a plan to go out and visit them. They had remained very close. And I was on the phone with him a week before I went. It was September of 91. And we made a plan. We were going to drive down into Yellowstone. And he said, on the way, we're going to stop at a place. He said, do you know Gary Carter? I said, sure. He's a catcher for the New York Mets. Not that Gary Carter. So Gary Carter, cowboy artist, who's been a brilliant artist and amazing draftsman. And he said, we're going to stop because they had purchased a sketch from Gary. It was probably 1824, but his signature was obscured by the map. So Gary had said to them, I'll take it back and I'll take it out, sign it where you can see it. And then they said, well, come and pick it up. And he told me you were going to stop at the artist studio. And I swear to you, something came over me and I thought, this is going to be monumental, coming and visiting this artist studio. I don't know why I felt that, but it was significant for me. It was some kind of a spiritual sensitivity, and it turned out to be completely true. We went. I looked at his through his working sketches that he had a few of them framed, and I bought this wonderful mountain man. It was a mountain man rendezvous piece, 2 horsemen on mountain men on horseback, riding at full gallop down into the Snake River. Mountain man encampment in front of Mount Moran. And I bought that for $650, and I thought, my wife is going to kill it. And she's built me, hundreds of times since then for the same reason. But she's been very, very good to me and my addiction problem. And so that was the beginning. And a few years after that, like you, Abigail, we went to our friends there, said, there's a art festival in Jackson, Wyoming, and so we should just meet there this September. And so we did. We went to the National Museum of Wildlife Art, and they had the miniature show and sale. That's all it was in 96, 95, 96, 97. It was just miniatures, nothing bigger than 10 by 12. And we had never bought, except for one, oil paintings. And those small works enabled us to do that, and that's how we got our start. In 1998, Clyde asked the big one, the Red Smith Award, Best in Show, the Artist Choice Award, and it was in Norway, small little 10 by 12, and I put our name in for that, and they drew our name. And Kathy said, we just bought a painting of goats for $3,000, and it's one of the greatest little paintings that we own. So it's been a good life. That's more information you asked for.
No, that's a great answer, and I love that the CA is figured in prominently here with 2 of our guests. Yeah. Those shows I know were really instrumental for a lot of collectors because they're a lot of fun. I'd love to know, because the theme of the panel here is just like learning about how we adapt as collectors, as consumers of the arts, as artists ourselves. I'd love to know what resources were available to you when you were coming up as collectors, and Don, for you as an artist. Did you feel like there was a support among the community, people you could turn to for help or assistance? Or did you feel like you were on your own? This was prior to the internet for all of us. So I'd love to know what resources were available then versus now. Abigail, can we start with you? What was available to you to help you begin as a collector?
I think for me it was about going to different museums and just seeing different art out there. And so I've always traveled with my work, and anytime I go somewhere, I've always had this love for Western, and so whether it's in Washington, D.C. or at the Metropolitan, I go find that section. And literally at the Metropolitan, some of the Western is not as prominent as some of the other artwork, and so it's just kind of cool pieces, but they'll be in my small room, right, and kind of rack, and we'll have a whole bunch on the wall. And so just looking at, it's always just looking at the details and seeing the beauty, and I very much like to see the beauty of it and see how it's painted, whether it's a pencil or style, and then we go to galleries. And so, whether it was in Santa Fe or, Phoenix, a lot of the different galleries out there, and for Jackson Hole. But just looking at it, and every time I get a chance, I always wanted to stop by and see what they have, see if I like anything. And so then if I like something, I go find my husband and see if he liked it, because over the years, we've always want to, for our anniversary, we try to buy something for our anniversary to for ourselves. Instead of going on a trip or doing, going somewhere or buying something for the house, we always felt it was something that we needed to have, something we could appreciate all the time. And so my dad always said, you can put these small ones are nice, but you can put them in the bathroom. Because I have one of my rooms in my house is just all pencils and Sharpies. And they're just beautiful.
And how has collecting changed to now? I mean, there's more resources. I know a lot of people use social media.
There's a lot
to
of
look at art.
resources now. And so today, I can go on an auction, for example, and I can go look at what is out there, what it's sold for. And I didn't get used to do that before. We would just kind of be like, we just write our little notes at every sale, write down what it's sold for, and then I kind of had some idea. And a lot of things have changed on that note. There's so much more available that you can see, and I think it's nice to be able to see what's out there. So sometimes I'll look at an artist that we knew, even if the night of the artist will have this year, there'll be some new artists, and I won't know anything about them until I get to go look at them online. So I think it's great, because I like a lot of people, I actually like to have different pieces. I might have a couple with one artist, but I like to have new pieces, and to support everybody.
Don, I'm going to come back to you, but I want to go to Tim. And Tim, what resources were available to you when you were sort of coming up, and have they changed as well? Just as a collector, but also as someone who was promoting shows and hosting shows. I'd love to know how that worked.
Well, to the first part of that, Gary Carter, Cowboy Artist in '91, I first became aware of him, and his brother published his finished paintings as prints. So there, hence the art print business that he promoted, and I started getting his brother's newsletter, and I'd see the new prints from Gary Carter, and then I was looking also at Applejack and Somerset House and Greenwich Workshop and all of these print businesses that issued fine art prints, and so that was, I could buy a print for $125 or $150, and so I became fairly addicted to that. And we have a flat file, a couple of flat files with about 140 prints in it now. And if you figure that at about $150 a pop, but that was my art education. So those resources, so that I was looking at all those catalogs, and in parallel with that, all of the art magazines. So I was subscribing to Art of the West and Western Art Collector and Southwest Art and all of those through the 90s. And so those resources were very important to me, because I was in the kitchen remodeling business on Long Island, New York. So even though I'm a Westerner at heart completely, that was I could dip into that world by all those magazines like yours, and be able to educate myself on who were the great artists, and so then come Jackson Hole in 1996, paying attention to the small works, then it was an ever expanding world for me. And then I'll take just a step further to your point about shows, etc. So in New York City is a phenomenal and very historic art club called the Salmagundi Club, and that was started in 1871. And Thomas Moran was our fourth president. And we have a spectacular brownstone mansion on Fifth Avenue. It's worth about $75 million, and it's it's an artist-run organization, art, and we have lay members as well. So returning from Jackson in 2002, I was in the Dallas-Fort Worth airport waiting at the LaGuardia gate. I looked across, and from here to Michael, there's a guy opens catalog from Jackson Hole. I'm like, oh my gosh, here's a guy who was clearly in Jackson, and he's now at the LaGuardia gate. And so I went over and spoke to him, and on the flight I went back and sat beside him in his seat, and he was a very friendly guy, and he'd been an artist in the show. That it was Arts for the Parks. He was in the show there at Jackson Lake Lodge, and he said, have you ever been to the Salmagundi Club? And I went, oh, Sal what? You know, crazy name. So I went and joined as a lay member, patron member. Several years later, I was frustrated that they weren't showing the work as good as we see here in these shows in the West. Your show, Pre to West, the Autry, you know, great events that I was always coming west, having been from here. And so I proposed to them that they let me do a fundraising show. I was an idiot. I was like, what was I thinking? But I just copied every good idea from all these great shows and created a fundraiser there. And that just, we did that first show in 2008, in May of 2008, and the wheels came off the economy in the fall of 2008. And so we were very fortunate and had artists from all over, and there were a lot of Western artists that were in that. It was Tucker Smith and, landscape artists, Clyde Aspavig, and David LaPelle, Sherry McGraw. It's a long list of great people. And we sold $412,000 that first sale. And the people at Salmagundi were like, you can do this? And it was really dumb luck on my part. I can't claim any great brilliance. Like I said, I just copied every good idea, and I knew the artists. I've always had good relationships with artists, and they said, yes, if you build it, we will come. And so that's, I've talked way too long, but it's good information, and it is a huge part of my life.
No, thank you so much. I think it's really important to this conversation. And going to Don, because you have an artist perspective, so your perspective is a little bit different. But I'd love to know, when you were starting out, in Japan, were there resources for Western artists? Were you sort of lost, or did you know what you wanted?
Well, I've always had an interest in Western art since I was a kid. And there's a backstory for that because of my New Zealand past. But in Japan, no, there really wasn't. But I remember there was a key day for me, though. And I was shopping in Shibuya, which is a really crazy part of Tokyo. I mean, whenever you see like a movie or a documentary of Tokyo, you always see Shibuya because you see all these thousands of people crossing this big street and stuff. But there's a lot of shops there, and there was one shop called Tower Records, which you guys probably know about. And it was a big tower. I mean, one of the biggest Tower Records probably in the world. And on the 8th floor, I still remember this because I used to go there all the time. The 8th floor of that Tower Records was all the foreign books and magazines, and most of them were English, and a lot of English magazines, and a lot of American magazines. And I was shopping through there one day looking for something to read, and I came across two magazines that kind of changed my whole perspective on Western art. Actually, it wasn't even a change; it just really introduced me to what's possible with this genre, with this business. And the two magazines were Art of the West and Southwest Art Magazine. Sorry, yours but I got a couple of those two, and took them home, and just, man, I was just, whoa, wow, look at this stuff. I was really just blown away, and so I got a subscription, so I get the subscription sent to Japan, and got them every month. Well, one of them, bi-monthly, but the Southwest Art I got every month. And I got to know all the artists through the magazine, and what was going on, and who was painting what, and what was popular, and it just was like my manna from heaven in a way. I mean, I knew this is something for me. But as far as, I paint a lot of Native American stuff, and there's a backstory for that as well. But there wasn't obviously I didn't have a lot of Native American friends in Tokyo. In fact, I didn't have any. But I did have a Japanese wife who looked a little Asian, and she has the bone structure. So she was my model, and my first probably first 100 paintings that I did were her, really. And I just had to change the face a little bit. Yeah, probably is too. But that's the truth. And I do remember, in that period of time, people actually, one of the comments that I would get in the shows in America was, yeah, your Indians look really Asian. Really? I don't know why. But yeah, of course they did. But my main resource really was those two magazines. Really, I couldn't wait every month to get those so I could see what's going on. But also, when I was a child in New Zealand, my parents are American, but our family lived in New Zealand for a while. I was born there, and I started school where all us kids were. But my father was he was born and raised in Arizona, in Prescott, Arizona, and his brother, Uncle Phil, who's dead now, but he was a big Western art fan, and he would go to the CA shows in Phoenix, and he would get the catalog for the shows, and he would send them to my dad, and of course I would see those. So really, if you really go back before Japan, it was then when I was quite young, and I would see the CA things, and it was like early CA. It was like at the very beginning, but they still had a catalog. So, yeah, that's pretty much what it came from.
I was scanning the room to see if there's any CA artists here. I know there are some CA artists in the show, but now we've had all three of our panelists mention the cowboy artists and how it's touched their lives in different ways, which is really a remarkable thing to a group to do that. So that's amazing. We were talking about this idea of longtime collectors. I'd love to know if, as you were coming up in the world of collecting and also shows and all these things, what were some of the things that you didn't realize you had to do at the beginning, but slowly you realized these are things that I have to be concerned about? I'm talking about the cleaning of your work, the maintenance and care of your work, appraisals. At the beginning, it probably seemed like I just have to buy the art, hang it on the wall, and that's it. But of course, there's more to it than that. At one point, did something change for you when you realized that you had to do more, or is that a concern? Abigail?
For me, I think it's about why you're collecting or what you want to do with the collection. And so do you collect because you love the artwork, or are you collecting because you're an investor? I always wanted to look for something that was really, really beautiful or really unique for me and detailed, and then I would, for what I thought was a good value. Then when as years go by, it's all about who you've been around. So my dad had all those catalogs too, and yes, I had them as a child as well. The Art of the West are still, actually I have one that's 40 years old still. And I didn't really think about that much, but because my dad would be like, well, that piece of artwork doesn't look very good, it needs to be redone. And I said, what do you mean? I bought it. I thought it was beautiful. He's like, but the patina is not right. So I found a foundry and I got the artist. Fortunately, she's still alive. This is Sandy Scott I bought a few years back, and she got on the phone with me to talk about what did it look like 40 years ago. So I bought a few pieces that we still do need to be redone. But I think you just need to take care of your stuff. You need to make sure it's clean. And artwork gets dirty. A lot of people don't touch it. You ever notice you go to somebody's house and it's like never moved up the wall. And you want to clean it, dust it. But and if you're getting something appraised and you're going to go do something with it, so if let's say you want to donate it, you need an appraisal. And so even right now, my husband and I were like, well, we want to change up some things, and so I'm going to have to go to the resale market and probably sell this so I can put something new on the wall. Because I don't have a lot of children that are saying, hey, I want that. Not yet, at least. But so for me, it's just actually realizing I think you just buy something you find. Like you said, most people think that. But then if you're ready to donate, or you will definitely have to have an appraisal. So, and it's amazing what they can do. They don't need to see the artwork. You can send photos, and you can get all this done remotely. It's an amazing thing. The internet has changed our world. I know back years ago, I was a lawyer and I did estate plans. So I did hundreds of appraisals. And I would come in and I get the appraisals organized for my clients. And then I would always ask the question, well, what are we going to do with all this? And so sometimes if I was helping them plan, I would say, what do you want to do with your collection? So those are all questions people need to be asked, or should be asked, because we all want. Depends on if you're, as I said, if you're buying it for the love of it, or buying it as an investor. If you're buying for the love, then you probably want it to be seen within your family if you can. But if not, if there's not a location, then somewhere else that it can be seen. And so to me, then you want to either go to the museum or organize something where you can donate it, or you can give it for a cause. Let's say you have a charity. One of my colleagues the other day was donating some stuff, and the proceeds were going for something for that same cost. So, but, it depends on what you want to do.
Well, you sort of bring up another issue, and I think it's interesting, is when you start collecting, do you want the works to sort of fit together as part of a larger collection? Or do you just buy what you like and put it on the wall, and whether it fits together or not, is that an issue? I'd love to know, did you have those thoughts early on?
Well, everything I've ever purchased is, in some way, was at one show, or would have been at a show if an artist could put it in a show, right? So most of what because I've gone through the West, all the different shows I've gone to, they're of that Western art nature, but sometimes there's animals, sometimes there's Indians, sometimes they're cowboys. And I remember years ago when we were moving houses, and when we moved, we actually organized everything by genre. And so we have our cowboy wall, we have our Indian wall, and so, but everything kind of goes together, right? And so you can organize it by that. But no, I don't have things that are not in what I love. So I was always very particular with lots of things I don't like. And so I just have always loved what you guys make, so nothing plus.
It's sort of on those same lines. When you're starting a collection, you sort of have to curate it, right? You want things to fit together. We were talking before we were started today about you have a marine collection, but you also have Western work. Do you make a distinction when you're out looking for something and you want to put something next to something else in your house, or really it's just what moves you? Or to talk through that, how that works.
Yeah, no, it's we have maybe 430 artworks, mostly paintings, a good bit of sculpture, and it's about as eclectic as you can get. Living in the East, I got very familiar with some great maritime artists and close friends with the best people in that business. It was John Stobart, who passed about 6 weeks ago. He was 93, but he was a good friend, and we spent time with him at his place. And Christopher Clawson, who's widely regarded as the best of all, that's usually described to him by his painter friends that just say, "Chris, you're the guy who found her." So we have probably 35 maritime pieces, and we live in Coyland. And so I always think, well, how's that work? But it works great, but we have a lot of landscape pieces, a good amount of fine wildlife pieces, certainly Western pieces, and so it's a real miscellany. And my wife hangs the house, and she makes everyone play well together. So it's really it's a beautiful thing to see. We don't exhibit all of the things that we have. There was never a master plan. I can't claim any great smart that way, but I rather like the uniqueness of the diversity, and so you're all invited to come if you want to stop by and see the collection anytime. It is interesting. So I'll take this a step further and kind of where you want to go with this, and that is, so we have, with the exception of a big flat asp, a big landscape in our dining room, we have all maritime, and just a few pieces. It's not a real big house. We need a bigger house, but we don't want a bigger house. But I've decided, so I'm selling a Christopher Blossom that I have. It's 24 by 30. It's a spectacular painting, and with that many artworks. So I'm 71. I'm not near death, I think, but none of us know, right? So we do begin to think about, well, we have two daughters that are 38 and 41. They're not interested in a large part of the art collection, and so this comes to the question, it's like, well, so we start thinking, and does the museum want it? Well, museums can't handle the art that we've all got to give. They don't want most of it. If I said, here's 100 paintings to one of my favorite institutions, well, they might, if we were lucky, they might hang 2 or 3 of those, and the rest would be in storage. Or so this should be helpful to our discussion. I'm on the board at the House Foundation in Taos, New Mexico, and we've got a wonderful program there that is it's the estate art planning, and so we give that brochure out to collectors and interested people that say, hey, I want to donate this. Well, then we have a very systematic discussion to say, okay, usually people that want to give, they want to be helpful, and hopefully some of their work will end up hanging, but in the main, it's a well-reasoned plan to say, okay, we'd like to talk with you about your collection, and this is how it would work. We have a very small focus here, but if you're willing to donate to allow us to sell, X pieces that will go to benefit the organization, I think that's really maybe, Michael, you can correct me, or anyone else, I think that's the only reasonable way for de-accessioning a collection. It's so, just give me another 2 minutes. It's frustrating, it's sad to me. So I've been very focused, and we've always been focused on quality. And I will be bold enough to say our collection is really good. We've really only bought really great artworks, just almost without fail, and fortunate for that. But I see collections like ours, like others, that end up in an auction catalog. It's like, here's the collection of John T. Smoot, and it's, we're auctioning John's collection off, John and Ann, and so you see their lifetime of work as collectors, the passion of loving the art, and it's just scattered to the wind, and that's just inevitable, and it's sad in a way. But on the tomorrow morning's discussion, you can say, well, those guys that are on their way, those folks that are starting as collectors, can be the great beneficiaries, because there are so many wonderful collections that are going to be coming onto the market in the next 10, 20 years. That it's going to be an amazing amount of very good art, legacy art, and that's important too as you're collecting, to think about that caliber of art. But you just need to make a plan, and I can't say that I've got that plan finalized, but it's because we don't know what tomorrow brings. I might be gone, and we just need to be prepared. and they don't want near all of the art that we art addicts have amassed.
I think you brought up some really good points, and I think that that's the direction we're going to head in right now, because we do want to talk about some of that, is what happens to collections when people are either, maybe they're downsizing, maybe there was a death in the family, and the collection needs to go somewhere. Tim, I know you've heard these stories too, of collectors that have these beautiful collections, but the collection does not carry the weight that it does for the collector with the children. The children see it sometimes as a burden. They have all this art, and you mentioned brown furniture. There's all this art, and they don't know what to do with it. So, going back to that question, how do you begin to plan? I'd love to know, Abigail, from you as well. What are some things that we should be considering, or that people should be considering? Certainly, Tim mentioned museums, donating things to museums, but that could be.
It's a small.
Yeah. We haven't talked about auctions yet. I want to talk about auctions a little bit, and also maybe how galleries can fit into this. I'd love to know from all three of you, what are your thoughts on this, on how to begin to plan for the future when it comes to artwork?
One of the fun things that we did years ago, Michael, and I don't think you were at the museum yet, but since I've been at every night of the artist since it started, we had one year, we had I don't know, I think people donated some art to the show, and it didn't take away from the show at all, but they donated, and actually, I remember getting it was like the draw sale, and I got drawn to this beautiful G. Harvey, and it was just a little one, and there must have been 200 names in that box. It was like overflowing, and everybody's like, "I'll buy that from you." I said, "No, I got it. And it wasn't a lot. It was a little G. Harvey, but you think about your artwork, and it needs to go somewhere, right? So you have, for me, my options are I like to talk to my family, and so some people don't talk to their children enough, and I've been one of those who have helped over the years, but also it's important to talk to your family and see what your family likes and what they don't like, because as somebody who actually collected it, I like to have it stay in the family, right? So, but there's sometimes too much, right? So having them pick out what they like, their favorites, and then that way you can at least make sure that those favorites, before you start giving it away or selling it, that the favorites that they really liked, it's kind of their keepsake. So I have a painting of my grandmother's that she collected, actually. It's in one of our houses, and every time I look at it, it just reminds me of my grandmother. It makes me so happy. It's not her. She owned it. She purchased it, and it's a very famous artist. But just to be able to have that and see that, so I think it's important to talk to your family, whether it's just children or even if it's nieces or nephews. A lot of people have a lot of ability to do different things and make a lot of people happy if they like the love of art. Now, if you don't have that love, then I think it's important to go to decide, make those wishes known, whether it's you who are making a decision that you're going to touch base with a Michael or a different museum and see if they have an interest in a piece or two or a couple of pieces. But it might be that, as you said, you could agree that some are sold and some are kept, and then it actually allows the museum to flourish, and your pieces will be seen forever, and you'll have that legacy there. So I think it depends a lot about what's important to you and what that legacy looks like. For some people, as you said, the collection is sold, and that's maybe not what they intended, but you see like Jackie Onassis sale, remember Sotheby's? I look at every Sotheby's and auction catalog on every art sale, and so you'll look at pieces and you want other people to enjoy them, and there's just so many people that love art, so there's lots of homes out there, so I think it's exciting.
John, these issues apply to artists as well. Have you thought about what happens to your studio and your archival materials? I mean, I know you're still at the peak of your art career. These are things that are many years down the road, but what you leave behind, is that something that you feel like artists should think more about? Or
They probably should, and I probably should. But honestly, I don't think too much about that. Definitely, well, in the art that I do, it requires a lot of props. And I spent probably the last 10 or 15 years just buying a lot of props that aid me in trying to be successful in the paintings that I try to do, which are mostly historical in nature. And a lot of the stuff that I have accumulated in my studio is not cheap. It's to find these things are difficult in itself, but if you have to have them made, which I have a lot of this stuff made, it's expensive, so it's added up. So I have a studio full of artifacts, and some real, a lot of reproductions, and it's worth the money because I spent some time doing it. And I do kind of think about where that's going. I don't know. It's if something were to happen to me and my wife, who's Japanese, it would be hard for her anyways because she English isn't her native language. But I think one thing that I've kind of been thinking recently is about all that stuff, and I know that I'm not really talking about artwork here, but it's part of the process to making my art, so it's kind of relevant. Is that I think that a lot of the stuff that I have could be beneficial to another artist who wants to pursue the same line of work that I do. And I remember when I started off, the thought of like maybe getting some really nice stuff that I could use from another artist would have been something that would really have made me happy from inside. For that, I guess I would like probably some of those things to go to another artist to help them along the way. But yeah.
I want to talk about auctions.
Yeah, it's the auctions. I thought that was.
Yeah, that's where we're headed, because that's where a lot of these materials end up sometimes.
Yeah.
Because to Tim's point, there's always usually some good stuff from the big collections that belongs in museums, and museums will gladly take those from collectors. But some of it just has to go to auction just by the nature of the size and the scope of the collection. Does that terrify you as collectors and as artists? What are your relationships like with auctions? And Tim, if you don't mind, let's start with you. Do auctions? Are you comfortable with that idea? With your art, with other art?
I'm comfortable buying art at auctions.
You did not say selling.
I've only sold a couple of pieces through auctions. That's not recently, and that's worked out well in the past. But I'm not sure that just to clarify the focus of the answer you want me to give. Tell me again about in the auction.
Just and this is something that Don and I talked about before the panel today. Auctions can be very terrifying if you're selling, especially for an artist. You might not get what you paid for it or what you want for it, and so that can be very, very scary. So thinking of it from a collector's point of view, dumping a collection into an auction house can really be terrifying.
I think so. I think it's a scary proposition to do personally. Just like you just don't know. It's the unknown. It's really, and if you're, I would say, choose your auction, not necessarily your auction house as much as the specific auction of that house, where who's going to be there. The best scenario for a collector is to go to an auction where there's art, and it's not necessarily an art auction. It could be a Western auction or something not specifically related to the art, and you can pick up some great deals. I'm embarrassingly still focused on acquisitions rather than, and so to that point, let me digress and say, if you really pay attention across the board, if you plug in your artist names of people that you want to keep track of, you put it into a website like Live Auctioneers, and you get notified when there's a dump or a house or a shrub, and typically with deceased artists, but you can sometimes find a sleeper out there that's just really, really fun to get. But when it comes to the other side of that and selling, and I'm not kind of involved with artists living artists selling at auctions, I'm always nervous about that. And it's inevitable. You know, it's like we've got the auction tonight, right? In a controlled environment like this, then this is where I would say to artists, yeah, I think you're very comfortable putting your piece in an auction like tonight's auction. I'm very good with that. And your auctioneer is the gold standard of auctioneers, in my opinion. And so it will probably bode well for the artists to sell. But it's a nervous thing because you never know.
In the March issue of Western Art Collector, I related a story for our Mark Majori article. And Michael told it to me, Michael Schumann told it to me, that Mark Majori was in this room and they were talking about auctions, and he raised his hand and said, I like the auctions because they're dangerous. So I want to talk to Don about this. As an artist, what do auctions mean to you? And do you sort of approach them, you know, as Tim and I kind of were mentioning, is it scary to do that?
Oh, it's damn scary. Yeah. In fact, I heard one really well-known artist just say his description was it's slow death. So, and it can be for sure. And I was just talking to another artist recently, and we were talking about that when your painting's up on the auction block, actually 2 lots before your painting comes up, your heart starts beating really hard. And then the lot before that, it's like beating out of your chest. And then it's like, man, maybe I should just leave the room for when my piece comes up. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely a scary thing. And I have mixed feelings about auctions, really. I think, if you're doing good in an auction, you love an auction. If you're not maybe doing too good, you don't like an auction. I mean, that's the basic thing, right? That's the basic principle. But I would like to make this one point, though, for people, collectors who are, there's 3 stages of life, really. It's like the stage 1 is you want stuff, stage 2 is you accumulate stuff, and stage 3 is you get rid of stuff. But if you're at the stage where you're trying to, get rid of some of your collection, if there's an artist that you really like and you've collected and you have several of that artist's pieces, and you care about that artist's career, do some thinking when you're going to maybe put up some pieces on the auction block, because you don't want to just put a bunch of his pieces or her pieces there, because it can really, it can damage this artist that you've liked, that you have a relationship with probably. So you really need to think about that. I had a situation that happened to me fairly early on in my career. And it was back in 2008 when the economy was on the skids, and things weren't going real good. But I was just kind of really getting some stride a little bit in my art career. And I had this collector who was a really great. He had a great collection of art. I mean, he had everyone. You name the artist, he had it, and he had several houses, and they were full. But the thing is that he was actually my neighbor, so like a walk through the woods to his house was a 5-minute walk through the woods from my house to his house. So it was really neat because I got to go over to his house and see a lot of really great art, and he would buy art all the time, and I'd get to hang it, so I'd get to look at it really good. It was a lot. He also had this amazing collection of those silver-plated saddles, probably one of the best collections in the world. But during that time, and we were friends, and he really tried to help me out during those hard times. And he was buying a lot of my work just to keep me going. But he was actually having me paint a painting a week for him. And and if I didn't have one, he would call me up, and he was kind of a rough kind of guy. And he would like, "You son of a, where's my painting, right?" But that's just how it was. I mean, people either loved them or hated them. But that's how it was. And I remember one time he was giving me some real hell, and I said something back to him like, "You," whatever. I used a bad word. And actually, he liked me more after that. So But so a lot of the paintings that he bought over that couple years, not all of them were that great. And like I said, I was painting a lot of paintings for him, and they were doing really quickly. But he had said to me, he said, all these paintings that I'm buying from you, and all my artwork here is always going to stay in this house. It's still, this is where it's going to be. And he had cancer too, so he knew that his life was getting short. And his wife was like, yeah, it's going to stay here. Yeah, this is where it's going to be. So it made me feel more comfortable. Well, he died, and well, it wasn't long after that you know, there was some turmoil between his children, his ex-wife, and his current wife, and before you know it, the whole damn thing went up into the auctions, into the whole collection, and I had like 70 pieces or something that just boom into the auctions, and you know, all my artist friends were like, "Oh, Don, man, I'm sorry, you know, we don't know what to say. You know, that's going to be rough. You know, oh, geez." And I was just starting, and I didn't know what to expect, but all these people were saying this to me, so I was like, yeah, gosh, I guess that's good for me. You know, better polish up my welcome to McDonald's, you know, if I take your word. But really, though, the point that I'm going to make here is that in that case, I was really just beginning. No one really knew who I was. I mean, I really didn't have a name at all. No one knew who I was. And yes, like for the next 3 years, tons of Don Oelze paintings went on the market, but it actually helped me because if I had had a name, it would have hurt me. But the fact that I didn't have a name, it helped me because then pretty soon I was everywhere, and people would come up to me and go, "You're Don Oelze, aren't you?" So you know, so it was a rare thing that it helped me. But I bring this up because if you do have an artist that you're collecting and that you love, and you have a good relationship with them, maybe you have a good friendship even, you know, think about that, you know, about that when you make the decision to whatever you're going to do with the art, you know, on auctions or whatever. But yeah, auctions, I have mixed feelings about.
So here's a question for you, Don. So what if that collector was to contact you and say, "Hey, are you interested in buying back a painting or two?" Or you know, rather than put it out there to someone else, would an artist like that idea possibly to get a second look at it, or to
maybe it depends on what the painting looks like. I think that would be the biggest,
of course. But wouldn't that be an interesting opportunity for a collector to give to an artist that they love, that, you know, you've got this, and say, you know, I'm going to, you know, before I cast this out to, you know, a stranger, would you like to take it back into the fold and maybe keep it for your children, or to, you know, just to buy it back? Or, you know, I think that people need to think creative like that.
It'd be a nice discussion to have.
I think so.
I mean, if they did approach you with that, then it would make you feel good because at least you know that they really did like you.
Yeah.
That they really liked your work. You know? It's a respectful thing.
It is a respectful thing.
Or Don, if maybe not, if you couldn't buy that word, but maybe one of your galleries.
Direct.
Exactly. And
Yes.
Or I mean, you know, most of the people who are my collectors because they like my work. So possibly I could get two people together.
Yeah.
Connect them up.
Exactly.
Abigail, what is your relationship then, like with auctions, but also I'm going to expand that on also galleries? Do you feel like you've worked well with auctions, or do you buy from auctions?
I do buy from auctions, but I would say I guess I'm of those three phases Don described. I'm not exiting all my artwork yet, so I do have most of my artwork, and I do still add to it, so I'm still on a little bit. And I have new places to put things, so I just took over another building, so I it's more hallways. But, you know, I think that, you know, you can. I will say, years ago, I bought some stuff at an auction, and it wasn't artwork, it was jewelry, actually. And I was given some strict instructions, but then when the person came back, I didn't understand I wasn't supposed to say yes to everything. And so I had to go back and give some back to the auction. They understood. It worked out well, but with auctions, you know, I do have some relationships. I will say that it's important to have somebody there taking care of you. And if you have that relationship, they can also make that connection and help connect you up, just like Don with. And I like that idea of going back to the artist, because they may have somebody else that might want that. And as you said, if you like the piece, it always helps. But some of those, that 70 collection, you may not want to make, which is earlier. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. The ones that were changed quick, but the ones that you really, you know, spend a lot of time on, you had the correct amount of time to create a piece of artwork. You're not under pressure. I do think that you can definitely connect up, and sometimes I'll go and I'll literally go and just be looking for a specific animal there as well. I have some Julia Rogers, and I have landscaped animals. I have little areas in different places, so I do have kind of collections. And because I loved animals of being there, I was looking for, this particular type of animal. And so I will actually literally go say, do you have any bears, or do you have any this kind of milldeye antelope? This is what we want on the wall. So I will specifically find different things and connect up with an auctioneer and looking for something. And if I needed to, I would. I actually have this whole thing, but I have about 3 pieces that I was thinking about because they were early on in my collections, and they don't match my collection as well as some of others. So when you said, did I pick it all out intentionally? No. But did it all end up being kind of going together? Most of it, yes, because I like the same things. And from different areas.
Wonderful. Tim, I'm going to ask you this question next, but what has your experience been with galleries?
Galleries? I actually enjoy, my favorite is buying it truly at sales. But I have bought a couple pieces at galleries. Usually it's something I'll see when I'm on a trip, and then I'll have to take pictures and then discuss with my husband and make sure we're all together. But they're awesome, nice people. And then they'll connect up if I need connections. And they'll be like, oh, it was my artist I was following. And if I know I didn't get a piece at a sale and I really like that artist, I will go find their show. And I'll go connect up to see what's going to be on sale there. So it will kind of follow.
And Tim, for you, you and I kind of run in some similar circles. What has your experience been in the gallery world? Have you seen things pick up there? How are you feeling about galleries right now?
Galleries are terrific, and they offer an absolute important and terrific service to collectors, because once you establish a relationship with a gallery, they can really, take care of you in a wonderful way if you're looking for a certain artist or whatnot. And galleries, quick aside, they'll almost always work with you financially. We're not big money people. We can't write a $50,000 check for art. We'll frequently pay overtime, so that's been a nice advantage in working with the galleries. It's I think challenging time for galleries because of the internet, and some artists are not in galleries, or they're limited. Galleries are I think the art show gallery relationship is probably a challenging one, because the galleries know that artists like are here this weekend are more likely than not to put their best work into a high profile show like this. So the galleries, miss out a bit on that. I think that's the business world. I'm sorry, that's just the way things, are. People have an inspiration to do a show, and it benefits an organization, and so I think why not? And it brings, these events like this weekend are just lovely for both sides of collectors and for artists. It's really a special time, and people are hungry. Are you sold out of tickets this weekend?
Yeah.
Sold out. That is just terrific, and understandably, because when you have a show that does as good a job as you guys do, then you don't want to miss this. This is really important, and so I think that in the end, the galleries and the shows play well together. The galleries get promotion because, typically, and I'm not sure if you do this, but in your catalog, you'll say, yeah, you can find, Joe Smith at gallery X, Y, and Z, and where do I didn't get drawn for this piece, but where can I find more? And that's good for the galleries to give them that exposure. So, yeah, and then there's the whole thing. So.
Don, your relationship with your galleries, I can imagine that they want the best work you can give them, but you also want to give the best work to this show and other shows. describe that push and pull that you get between the shows and the galleries and your best clients that you maybe sell directly to. Is it a struggle to make it all work?
Yeah, I mean, it's always kind of a balancing act. It's a struggle. You know, I kind of, at the beginning of the year, I kind of look at my year and I see, well, what is it that I have to do this year? What am I committed to? And what shows do I have? What, gallery shows? Actually, I have a gallery show at Sellers West this very weekend. Actually, this same weekend too. But I'm here. Yeah. But so I look at that and I have to make a plan because what I did this year and I looked and the plan was a little different. What I decided to do was, okay, for the next 3 months, I'm just gonna paint a whole bunch of paintings, and I'm not gonna decide what painting goes to where. I'm just going to paint, and I'm going to try and do my best on all of them, which I do try to do my best on all of them. I don't want to rush them or whatever. I want to do my best, as we all did. And then at some point, I'm going to start picking. Out of this group that I now have, I'm going to start picking what goes to what. And to be honest, there are going to be some paintings that I feel are stronger than other ones. And where they go, I have to, the stronger ones maybe are going to go to something that I feel is going to be more beneficial to me, and the ones that are strong are going to go somewhere else. I have to think like that. So yeah, there's definitely some thought process on where they're going to go, and I don't want to slight any of the things that any of the shows or the galleries or the auction or whatever. I don't feel like that. But then some things are going to be better. For auctions, I mean there's no rhyme or reason sometimes to how an auction result happens. You can have an auction that's just superb, and then that very same auction with maybe a similar piece or whatever, the next year has got a completely different result. It's like it's hard to determine, like many things in life. But because I do a lot of auctions the last few years. I think last year I think I did 5. So that's a lot. That's like a lot of a lot. And I think I won't do that one this year. But I have noticed that even though there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to an auction, there are some certain things that are better, some certain subjects that seem to do better at auctions for me, and that would be paintings that are more active paintings, something where there's something moving, there's some action, because an auction is an action thing, it's an action event. So maybe action paintings go with that. So when I'm looking at this, this bunch of work that I'm going to select where it goes, probably the action paintings that are going to probably go to the auctions, whereas maybe the ones that are more calm, more quiet, maybe they're going to go to a museum show or a gallery show or whatever it may be. But you have to think about that.
I know that we want to get to some questions, but before we do that, I'd like to ask all three of you. There's not a lot of regret. There's not room for regret in life. But if you could go back and tell a younger version of yourself, maybe give them some advice, or just another collector that's just starting, I'd love to know if you would have any advice for them, or maybe some tips, or just something that maybe you had to learn the hard way on. Is there anything like that you can think of? Tim?
That's an interesting question. We've bought a lot of small paintings, and a lot of very good small paintings. I think there would be a piece of the answer that would say, rather than buy as frequently small paintings, let's say small paintings range from $3,000 to $5,000. So rather than spend our budget or allocation for art on 15 small paintings this year, stop myself, hold back, step back, be patient, wait, and have a larger lump sum to put on a larger significant painting. You know, that although I don't have any regrets about small paintings, you know, a lot of my Chris Blossoms are 10 by 12, and you know, and it's been very affordable. You know, you can buy those for $4,500, and I think they're worth a whole lot more than that. At least to me, they are. But there is that little push and pull on that topic.
John, as an artist, would you go back and tell yourself something to do something differently?
Yeah, probably a lot of things. Yeah,
We don't have that much time.
yeah, I mean, we all do that. I mean, when you're young, you're not as smart, right? Or you're not as wise, maybe. Maybe you're smarter, but you're not as wise for sure. So there's definitely a lot of things. I think if I could go back to many years back, I would try to get some instruction from someone who was really good. Which, you know, a lot of things, you know, I kind of consider myself a self-taught artist, and you know, I think I wasted a lot of time trying to learn something that I probably could have just been instructed about very quickly and made a lot more progress a lot quicker. You know, and I did kind of start late too, so you know, it was a real circuitous route for me to get to be, you know, a painter. But yeah, if I could do that again, I would try to find some artists that I really respected and looked up to, and I would just try to build a relationship with that person and see if I could get some tips. Yeah.
Abigail, any advice that you would give a younger version of yourself when maybe someone just started?
You know, I think it's to spend more time to probably understand the paintings that you're buying, why they were. I know some of the history of the paintings I have, but a lot of them I don't. And to spend that extra time, because it's a great story. And so when I look at the stories I hear from people I respect, and they talk about their artwork, and it was always like, and they have this long story about each piece of artwork. And my story is often shorter. And so it lets, unless I know the artist, which I know a lot of my artists, but a lot of some of them I don't know, and some of those people have passed away now. So I think getting to know, and I will say I agree with Tim that I got a lot of small paintings. I have a lot of small paintings. So that very first year we got like $2,000, and there was like 4 of them, right? That was a lot of money. And in 1997, and so, and then Roy's was a little bit more expensive, or Anderson back then, but it was small. And I remember my dad was like, "Just buy the best that you think you can afford, but you know, don't break the bank, you know." And so I have bought a few bigger paintings in the last probably 15 years, and we don't buy as many. And so I love the artwork, and I like to a little book, and I like to organize it. So I think one of the things you need is the younger stuff. You need to write all this stuff down as you're buying artwork, so you have the history back, and you come back and try to organize things.
Wonderful, thank you. I do think we have 10 or 12 minutes for some questions. We do have a microphone going around just so everyone can be heard.
Yes.
Let's go to some questions.
Okay, here we go.
Tim, you were talking about your estate program over at the house. A couple of questions about that. My understanding is that when someone donates art to a nonprofit, that the nonprofit has to hold on to it for 3 years before, in order to get the tax benefit out of it back to the donor. Do you guys abide by that?
Yes.
Okay. And my follow-up question is, how successful has that program been for you?
Been very successful. So we've had many people. And it helps that we now have a world-class facility on site that we built. We did a couple $1 million building renovation of a 5,000 square foot space that's state of the art with fire protection and climate control in a major way, and so that helps people notice us. And people have been very generous. We've had a couple of significant donations of unrestricted art that then we can do with as we determine. And we've built wonderful relationships with 5 different auction houses, and we rotate the accessioning of the art through those auction houses. We go from auction house to auction house, and we've negotiated favorable terms with them, so they charge us nothing to sell that artwork on our behalf. It's been a terrific program, and we're just getting started. That's been in action for about 3 years, and it's a great organization.
And those percentages are significant, so that's a big savings.
My question was alluded to earlier by a couple of the panelists. As I look around the room, I see primarily a generation that grew up on Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, and Bonanza. And I'm wondering, are there any studies or research on the subsequent generations that did not grow up in that environment, and how ready are they to buy into the Western art?
I will say that I feel like Seth Hopkins, we need Seth here to answer this question. He's got a really good answer to at least the first part of it. And he likes to say that the movie Toy Story is the story of the West. It's about a boy who plays with his cowboy toys, and then one day the space toy comes out, and then the cowboys go in the bin. And I've heard other people say that when Star Wars came out in 1977, that was the changeover in real life. And if everyone liked their cowboys and their westerns, then you go back and you can look and count the movies and the TV shows, and it changed after Star Wars. I'd love to know the panelists, though. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that.
People do talk about the Yellowstone TV series, and so anything like that gives attention to the West, that incentive to engage people. I don't know how much of that is watched by the younger set, but there's always, and for us, the TV series that you named that resonates, of course, but still, I like to think about the mystique of the American West. That it's just been a region of the world that has been long loved, and just the mystery and the magic of cowboys and Indians and the mountains and the trappers and the stories of the buffalo. And so it's not a clear answer, but
I think the pandemic helped to reimagine the West as well.
I think that's good. Yeah. She said the pandemic contributed to kind of invigorating that, maybe. So, Don, what for you? I mean, buyers of your art, what do you know about their ages?
It varies. I will add this, that, the younger generation, they're like tech. They're all about tech, and they get a lot of their news and information and stuff online. Instagram, Twitter. There's like a million of them. I don't know any of them, and what I really need to do is get a little bit better, right? That's right, at Instagram. But I do have an Instagram account, and I do try to promote my art on Instagram to a degree. I'm not as good as some people, but I'm learning. But I will say that a lot of the followers that I have, and I'm picking up followers all the time, and a lot of them that talk to me and send me notes and messages and like my artwork, and I go to their profile, and they're not old people, they're young.
Yeah.
So I think the thing is, I think that young people love the history. I think they do, but their way of connecting with it is just different. They just have to see it, and they see it in their way, and their way is tech.
I definitely encourage you to come to our panel tomorrow. I think we're going to get into this a little bit more. Bo Alexander, who's the director of the Maxwell Alexander Gallery, he's going to be on the panel, and we're going to talk a lot about this. But it's a really interesting idea. Bo's had a lot of success with a younger demographic, or just not even related to age, just new collectors. And it's really a fascinating thing. So we'll dive into it more tomorrow. But I think that I appreciate both of your answers on that.
Yeah, I got a question. Okay.
Oh, we got a Michael Dudash here.
I got a quick question. This goes back to what you were talking about you knowing the story behind the paintings. So one thing that I know when I've been able to do it at certain shows, put up a narrative, like Cowboy Artists of America. I've done that a couple of years, and I stand and watch people at the show, collectors, and they look at the painting, and then they'll walk up and they'll read it, and they go stand back and look at the painting, and they go back and read this thing again. Now, artists hate doing this, by the way. You know, they hate titling their paintings and having to write about them, narratives. But the question I got, I guess, for you as a collector, do you find that really helpful? And just like to get your opinion on that. You know, a few sentences or the backstory or what motivated the artist to paint it. I think if you go through the show here, I don't think there's any of that. And I know it's a bigger hassle for the museum type shows and stuff to have to put up with that, so it's a burden on them. But I know, like when I've done a show at the Legacy or whatever, I've done that, and it sure seems to make a difference for the collectors. What do you feel about that?
I think you're right. I think it's really nice to be able to know the history, and I can think of lots of pieces I know the history on, and some of it we maybe knew before we purchased it, but a lot of it might be after the purchase, but it's the history is what tells the stories, and that gets other people excited about artwork. So one of the things I love to do is to take people on tours and talk about the artwork, and that inspires them. And I think the Western art is, I mean, that's who we are in the United States. That's where we came from, and so I think there's no reason why young people today shouldn't know that history. And you appreciate that, and when they have a little money that they can save and enjoy something. I say I always love to have something that I get to see all the time. And, you know, you can buy an experience, but then that's just an experience. But if you get to see it all the time, it really makes it fun, and you get to appreciate it. And so I love the stories because it enlightens everybody else, and they get excited about it. And that's what creates enthusiasts is the stories. And so even if it's after the fact, I think it would be kind of cool to, you know, encourage them, hey, why don't you text your artist and you'll find the story. You know, it'd be a great little add to the show. Because it'll create more fans to do, quite frankly. I think it's a great suggestion.
Just a quick comment, that is, I appreciate your point very much, Michael, but even the title of an artwork can be huge for a collector or the desire to collect that piece, because if it speaks to you, if there's something of the story in even just the title. And some artists that I know, Chris Blossom, he can't title anything. He's terrible, be the first to say. His wife, Pat, is brilliant. So he has her title his pieces, thank God. But it can make the difference in a sale or not. I truly believe that. It's like, oh, I get it. You know, yeah.
ChatGPT.
Yeah, I always put the names, because sometimes I'll buy art and they don't have the names on them, but first thing I'll do is I'll have a place in Scottsdale to send out there and I have a mail and then I'm going to take it off the wall again and I kind of nail it down there and put it back up. But I always, absolutely. I always want to know the name. I agree. And I mean, if there's some things like tell you the names and the story, and it's just so much fun.
Michael, I'm sympathetic to artists. I don't know how you do titles.
Yeah.
That's tricky. I know.
I use my wife a lot. That's the truth. And I think you got a cottage industry, Michael, because you're a great writer, and I really mean that. I've told you that. You could just say, you know, $10 to title your painting. You could have a heck of a mail order business with.
So I can turn out a text pretty quickly, but I'll tell you, I've sat and looked at a headline for an hour, and it's the same exact thing that you're doing. It's the title. Sometimes titling it is you gotta hit the right one.
Yeah.
Did anyone else have any other questions?
I consider myself a young collector, and I really relate to the small works. I suffer from that. And one of the things that, one of the questions I had was, I'm impatient. My problem is I'm impatient. I want it now, and a small work will get me there, and it'll give me my fix. Over. So I relate to that so badly. tell my wife, I don't want to see the walls in my house. So that's my goal. But I hit a threshold where, someone in the last couple of years, where then I started realizing that I didn't keep track in any way, shape, or form of I'm such an emotional person when it comes to it, but I never kept track. And so then I started wondering, well, I wish I had kept track in more detailed notes about all the purchases I made. And I find it overwhelming sometimes to try to go back and try to remember the information about the pieces. And so I don't know if you guys can talk a little bit to, if you do have a system or that you use now. Someone started telling me, oh, there's software out there that you can use now, and I just like, oh my God, now I gotta, you take pictures and you upload them and you put names, and I'm like, oh my God, it starts to feel overwhelming to kind of even think that. And you would think I'd learn in the more recent things that I'm still bad about it. But I want to know from all of you, is there a system that you guys use?
I think Billy has an answer.
That's something we've been doing 53 years. We actually have loose leaf binders, and we do provenance pages on every single thing that I paint or collect. So there's like a thumbnail size image on the upper left, and then it's got an inventory number, and then the entire provenance and history, how much the piece cost, what it's worth. So we have a total history of everything that we've ever painted or bought. But that's what, I hope that answers your question. I mean, it's overwhelming. It takes some time.
My help actually had this issue not that long ago, and I was like, where did I buy that painting? And I couldn't remember. So I went to a couple museums and asked them to look me up at their database, and they sent me their database. And so they told me exactly what I paid for it. I bought it, and then I put it in an Excel spreadsheet. And so at least I had that start. Right now I didn't have all the pictures, but I have them all on my wall. So I did a little inventory count. And this last location I just did.
Well, you can also contact the artist if the artist is living, because most artists need to keep track of, you always have an archive of what we did, what we did, and where we went. I mean, most of us do.
I was going to say, Don, I've been in some artist studios, and I'm pretty sure there's some artists that have no records. But it sounds like you might do better than that.
I saw she keeps it track. Nice.
There are a couple of companies that help you do that. There's one out of Denver's Artwork Archive, and they have a real simple system. Artwork Archive is a company in Denver software that can help you plug in. So I would say, we need some kind of artaholics group that benefit from each other's ailment in some way. But just start with the paintings you buy this weekend. So just just making a prediction that you might, and so then just start now, and then little by little, go back and do one a month, and 15 years from now you'll be caught up.
That term "circa" really helps.
I love it.
It actually helped me out. On the term, part of that whole thing was, as we hit that threshold, I started thinking, okay, well, I should probably have insurance for this. And so that kind of instigated that thought process. And then it started going into...
If you remember me, I'm the director of David Carter Museum. It's good to see you again, Michael.
Now it's to that.
They don't require you
And so I collect different, I know Western art also contemporary, and then everyone's supposed to tell me, you gotta go to this appraiser for this kind of art, this appraiser for that kind of art, you can't. And I didn't know it was necessary when you start thinking about planning for the future. Do you need to appraise individual or as a collection, or how would you go towards kind of figuring that out as you plan? And to your point, if you're going to donate it, it sounds like you need some sort of appraising kind of to go with it. How have you maybe dealt with the appraising part of your collection?
Generally, you'll go to somebody who's an appraiser, somebody who actually auctions, is very involved in the auction generally, or a gallery, or has a very extensive gallery. But when you're doing that, they do one piece at a time generally. They don't do it as a collection, at least my experience. And it's every piece is individual. But unless you're actually donating something, you don't have to go to the expense of appraising something. In my experience with insurance is, and actually that's when I had to go update it, because I hadn't updated my insurance in like 15 years. And I was like, what did I buy? And then that's when I had to go organize it again. So, you know, put a price on there, yes, and you can go look up online, get a price, put a reasonable price on there, because they will go look. But generally, artwork is not, fortunately, unless you have some massive pieces aren't stolen, right? But sometimes they'll get damaged and you'll have to file a claim on your insurance. But that's just part of your homeowner's policy. And so that's where you put it if you don't have it insured already. You generally just go to your homeowner's policy. Now, if you have a more extensive, even if you don't have it in your house, you can tell them where your artwork is. So there's different ways you can go about that. And I don't know, what do you do here at Wesco, Michael?
The couple of general rules on appraisals is that for tax deduction purposes, you only have to have work. You only have to have work that's over $5,000 and above. It requires an appraisal. If it's less than $5,000, they'll generally. And I'm not a tax expert, so please, anything I say, make sure you verify it. But you can set a value up to $5,000, and I don't think anybody's going to look very closely at that. Once you get to $5,000 and above, an appraisal is required if you want to take a tax deduction. If you don't care about the tax deduction, the appraisal doesn't matter. It's only to get money back from Uncle Sam that it matters there. And the insurance companies generally like to know what the pieces are valued at. I have a small collection, and I've got a price on each piece. I don't generally change those from what my purchase price was, so I don't try to determine if it got up or down in value or anything like that. For the museum, everything that our museum collects, we intend to keep in perpetuity, which means keep it forever. So we do not require appraisals. If you're donating something and you have an appraisal and you're willing to give us a copy of it, we very much like to have that copy, but it's not required. It's only between you and the tax man is where the appraisal comes into play in terms of museum donations. In terms of selling work or well, especially selling work, auctions or galleries, they really, I think it helps you to know kind of where's the range of this piece, what should I expect from it. And I wouldn't typically take that at face value unless you have a long-time relationship with a gallery and auction house, and you know them and they know you, and it's been familiar. You probably want to do some of that on your own as your own due diligence to determine where the value ranges are on those pieces. But we will, two things. As long as I have this microphone, two things. One is that those who had mentioned that any donations coming to a museum, all museums have space issues, both gallery space issues and storage space issues. So if we had a kid came with 400 pieces and wanted to donate them to our museum, I would very much appreciate and probably have to what we call cherry pick that, and maybe take recent collection that came in, we had a little over 200 pieces. We kept 14 for the permanent collection so that donor would be well represented within the museum. But they agreed to allow us to sell, to benefit the museum, the remainder of that roughly 200 works. And then we do have to hold those works for 3 years in order for that tax deduction to clear. So it's not like a laundering operation. So that's required. And we do honor that. We have not ever sold any. We have pieces that we're holding, but Bristol Museum has never sold any pieces. the relationships, Tim, that you've developed with different auction houses, I think that's, ideally we'll look to do a similar sort of thing. Most donors for museums want you to, that's telling me to shut up, so I'm going to do that after this one last comment. Most donors want you to take their entire collection. They spent a lifetime building it, and they cherish it, and they don't understand when you say you can't donate it, or you can't take all of it. But look, the other problem is that the museum takes everything and they have, 300,000 paintings. They're in storage somewhere, and they're never going to be seen, or very rarely will they be seen. So some practicalness is really important with all of this. And sorry, one last thing. For the artists, make sure you vote for the Artist Choice Award. We're before the end of tonight, because we're going to tally everything at 11 o'clock tonight. And same thing for Patron's Choice. Make sure that you vote for your favorite artwork in the show, and your artists for your favorite artwork in the show, or the best artwork in the show. And then we'll be, we want to get all those tallies in so that we can present the awards tomorrow at the artist luncheon. So thank you again very much for being here. I'm going to turn this back over to Melanie.
All right. We are out of time now. Thank you all for attending. Thank you to our fabulous panelists. Thank you, Michael Clawson, as well. The museum does close at 3 p.m. today to get ready for our Friday evening event. So you have a few more minutes to get over there, but then it will open up again for our evening event at 5:30. And again, as Michael said, don't forget to vote for your Patron's Choice patrons, and then artists vote for your Artist Choice. There'll be boxes and voting boxes in each entryway on Pavilion 2 and Pavilion 3 as well. We have another panel happening here tomorrow morning at 9:30. Love to see you all again, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you so much.